The New Babylon, Chapter 22. Renfro Carver slipped up the alley adjacent to the church, past the guard shack. Kevin had relaxed the security assigned to him, and he was taking full advantage of it. He made his way swiftly up to the far corner of the block and ascended the fire escape stairs to the rooftop garden on Building 1. From there, he could see the entire block. He watched the foot traffic and jotted down some notes in his notebook. Then he saw them. His nephews, Winston and Cleveland, with several other young men. Some of them were recently recruited as trainees for the security team by John Allen or Kevin Falk. Renfro watched them for a few minutes and smiled as he said to himself, "This is as good a place as any to start." The young men were just hanging out. They were doing what young men do. They were trying to impress a small group of young ladies that were walking by them. Two of the young men had just finished the basic training required by Kevin to begin serving on the security team. They were feeling their confidence and wearing their newly earned black t-shirts and matching caps, which designated them as part of the team. They were showing off the Krav Maga techniques that they had learned the day before, in an effort to capture the young ladies' attention. Lightly sparring with one another in an overtly dramatic fashion seemed to be paying off with the girls. They stopped to flirt, and Renfro seized his opportunity. He descended the fire escape, came around the building, and advanced toward the group. He boldly walked up and addressed the boys. "Who taught you men those moves?" he asked. The older of the two boys spoke up. "We learned it in basic training. It's a requirement for serving on the security team," he eagerly announced. Renfro looked him up and down. "Son, you'd better be kidding me. With moves like that, you won't last 5 minutes in a real-world situation." The young man scoffed at him. "No disrespect, sir, but I'm certain I can hold my own. Maybe they did things differently in your day, but..." Renfro stopped in mid-sentence. He reached out, grabbed the boy's wrist with one hand, and twisted it around, applying pressure at the same time. The twisting motion brought the young man instantly down to his knees. Renfro stopped just short of breaking it and looked at the boy square in the eyes, saying, "It really hurts, don't it, boy?" Before he could answer, his friend approached rapidly from behind. Without releasing his grip on the boy's wrist, Renfro spun around, and with his free hand, he knocked the approaching boy slightly off balance. Then he swept his left leg around, catching his foot forcefully behind the boy's calves. The second boy went down fast and hard. The first boy tried to reposition himself to fight back when Renfro twisted a bit more on his wrist, causing him to let out an agonizing sound, kind of a half-scream, half-moaning sound. He quickly yielded and resumed a submissive position. The second boy, half dazed, started to get up. Renfro turned around, placed himself behind the first boy, releasing his grip upon him and shoving him into his friend, knocking him back off balance. Then Renfro stood up straight and squared off with the two boys as they got back to their feet. The only hurt the boys had suffered so far was to their pride and egos. Not wanting to lose face, they began to advance again upon Renfro. Renfro put up his hands out in front of him, signaling the boys to stop. "Gentlemen," he said, "we can go to the next step if you really want to, but I'm cautioning you against it." The two boys looked at each other and then back at Renfro. "Look," said Renfro, "I only meant to make a point. You boys are young and strong. You have just been taught inadequately. I can help you. I can teach you what you need to know to fight effectively." The other boys started to circle around to listen to what he was saying. Renfro looked around, addressing the entire group now. "What are you young men doing here? What is your purpose in this community? You are at the point in your lives when you should be learning to stand up for yourselves." The boys listened intently. He looked at the two new security team members. "The stuff they are teaching you is sound. I'm sure they are doing the best they can with the time and resources available to them. But I have specialized skills and training in this type of thing. I can teach you more. I can put more time in with you. If I get enough of you interested in learning these things, we can start a gym. There's an old garage down the road at the end of the block. It's abandoned, out in back of an abandoned house. We can clean it up and train there. Trust me, when I'm through with you, the security chief will want each and every one of you to join his team. You'll all get the respect you deserve." They continued to listen as Renfro spoke. He looked at his nephews, Winston and Cleveland. "What do you two think?" he asked. Then he looked over the group. "All of you are welcome to join me. I will be there at the garage tomorrow at noon. It's the green house down on the corner." He pointed down to the far corner of the block. "Out back, behind the house, anyone who wants to learn self-defense techniques is welcome. I hope to see you there tomorrow." He started to walk away and turned back and said, "For now, let's keep it to ourselves. Let's see if it goes anywhere before we make a big deal about it." He nodded and walked away. He smiled. He was pleased with himself, as he felt confident that most, if not all, the boys would be there the next day. He would teach them as he had promised. He would train them to fight and teach them to be disciplined. He would mold them into a confident force to be reckoned with. Along the way, he would allow them to recruit their friends and others that they knew on the block. He was, after all, building an army. Bryce and Bear walked along the ridge that led to Arby's cabin. Will Jr. and Lindsay followed close behind them. Bryce keyed the headset mic. "Patriot Base, copy?" The reply came back immediately. "Patriot Base, we copy." Bryce said, "Be advised, 4 coming in, ETA 10 minutes. "Roger that, Patriot 1, 10 minutes. Bart put the mic down and pushed his chair away from the table and went out into the main room. "Katie, they'll be here in 10. Put something onto the stove. Make some coffee for Bear and Bryce. Strong." He looked over at Arby. They didn't say anything about injuries, so most likely none. But be ready just in case. You need any assistant, Pete's your go-to. "Okay, people, this is it. They're coming in." Everyone let out a quick cheer. There were smiles all around. Bart pulled his wife aside. "Katie, there are 4 of them." She looked intensely at her husband and slowly nodded. "Did they say—" "No," Bart interrupted. "That's all we know." She nodded again and reached out and grabbed Bart's hand. "I thank God for you, baby, that you're here." He returned her smile. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." 2 hours later, freshly showered and with full bellies, Will Jr. sat on the couch surrounded by the entire team. Lindsay sat next to him, her head nestled into Bear's shoulder, her legs tucked up onto the couch beside her. She sipped her coffee as she and the others listened to Will carefully debrief the team members of every detail of their odyssey down from New York State. When he painfully recounted the events of his dad's death, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Bart sat and listened while his wife sat next to him with her arm around him, holding him firmly. She knew that if she let go, even for a brief moment, she would lose him in a torrent of emotion. She knew how important it was to him as group leader to maintain his composure. So she just held on and didn't let go. Bryce sat off by himself, listening intently as he stared coldly out the window into the backyard. His mind kept going through countless possible scenarios in which, in one way or another, he could have been there to help prevent those tragic events. At one point, Bear looked over at her husband. She knew exactly what he was doing, and as he glanced over at her, their eyes locking together for a brief moment, he knew that she did know. Bear knew her husband well, and she also knew that she would spend many hours during many sleepless nights to come talking him down off of this particular ledge. But for now, in this moment, she could do nothing but let him solemnly, silently grieve for his friend. She squeezed Lindsay a little tighter, pulling her in closer as she continued to stroke her head with her hand. The following day at noon, Renfro Carver stood in the garage that he had commandeered as a makeshift gym. It was a decent size, having 3 overhead doors and a small area off the rear, which once served as a workshop. He glanced at his watch as he waited in anticipation. Then the first boy rounded the corner from the street and advanced up the drive to the side of the house. He was followed closely by 4 more boys. He quickly tasked them with removing some debris left from the previous resident and set them to sweeping and fixing the place up. After about 45 minutes, there were 9 young men in attendance, along with Renfro, Cleveland Carver among them. Renfro asked his nephew, "Where's your brother, Cleve?" Cleve answered him, "I don't think he's planning on coming. We talked about it last night for a while. He just doesn't have any ambition for this kind of thing. He's learning a lot over at the infirmary, and he wants to be a nurse or something in the healthcare field, he says. I told him that was crazy. Anyway, guess he's not coming." He shrugged. Renfro spoke. "No, it's not crazy. Everyone has different paths to take, son. Nothing wrong with medical work. It's a noble calling." He forced a smile. Truth be told, he was concerned. He needed this thing of his to remain a secret, at least for now. He would talk to his nephew when he got home. Renfro, having went far in the military, knew better than anyone how dangerous someone who actively thought for himself could be. Yes, they needed to talk indeed. When the place was clean, Renfro gave the boys a break. They sat around on some old fold-up chairs and a bench that they found in the shop. Renfro began his speech. He commended them for their hard work. He reinforced the importance of what they were doing and celebrated the fact that each of them had decided to join his team, as he called them. His plan was to instill confidence and self-worth in them as they trained. He would slowly and methodically teach them that they were of great value. He would in fact instill in them a greater sense of value than he would assign to others. He would build their egos, build their confidence. He would build their bodies and their skill levels. Renfro had done this many times in an official capacity as a Green Beret. First in Southeast Asia, almost 50 years ago. Then, repeatedly, in many places throughout the world. He knew absolutely that given enough time, he could shape this group into a cohesive fighting force, lethal in every way. The only wild card would be if they were discovered too soon. If Kevin or any of the others found out what he was up to before he completed his reprogramming of their hearts and minds, it could spell disaster for his mission, and possibly for him personally. He had no allies in this community except for his aging mother and maybe Cleve. He would work tirelessly to change that, beginning with the young men here with him today. Then he thought again of Winston. Could he be brought on board? Could he be made to stay silent? And what if he could not be? Renfro squinted and grimaced. He rubbed his temples, almost distraught at the implications of it.